Welcome at the Go Beyond series, where we discuss the most important trends that we see in the e-commerce world and hear from the innovators who are moving with them. Today we're going to talk about greening the supply chain. E-commerce in Europe has truly taken off the back of the pandemic with double-digit growth across major markets. But as climate change comes closer to home after a summer of adverse weather throughout the continent, consumers are also demanding more climate actions. How does this translate to e-commerce? Do consumers see the need for sustainable behavior in their own shopping habits? And what can e-commerce businesses do to make their operations and deliveries more sustainable? In order to get those answers, I will be talking to our brilliant lineup of panelists about what they are seeing around in this important trend and what their experiences are. And I would like to welcome first Sean Rupsch. He's operations specialist at Fairphone. Welcome. Alicia van Ewijk, project manager sustainability at thuiswinkel.org. Welcome also.
Thank you.
With the two of you. Congratulations, you're
Thanks,
pregnant.
yeah.
And we also have digitally with us Zach Burns. He's international sustainability supervisor at UPS. Also welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
A recent survey of 10 countries, including the US, UK, France and Germany, published in The Guardian newspaper, found that 62% of people surveyed saw the climate crisis as the main environmental challenge faced by the world. But 74% were proud of what they're already doing for the planet, and 46% said they didn't need to change their habits. This begs the question in the context of e-commerce. Is there even a sufficient consumer demand to make sustainable products and services financially sustainable for businesses?
Yeah, so I think in the research paper that you mentioned there, they also talk about a bit solutions and who is responsible in the end to take action. It was a lot of weight put on government actions and government decisions, but I do think that in the end, the private sector in which we are in is a big step that we have to also include in making decisions and changing things. And so to say, I think Fairphone is a living example of this, of the demand. It shows that there is indeed a demand and people who are interested in buying sustainable products for whom it is important, and they choose those products over less sustainable products. And actually what we saw with Fairphone here as well, for every model that we sold, we see increasing sales numbers. So starting with the Fairphone 1, where we started with approximately 60,000 devices sold a year, Fairphone 2, 3, and the increase was seeable for us. So there must be a demand, and there has to be a demand as well.
So you proved there is a business.
Yes, we are, I think, a living example that there is a business.
Yes, that's good news to start with. How can consumers be nudged to make more sustainable choices in their e-commerce behavior, you think, so that the increase is getting bigger?
Now, first, I think one big thing that we are not always talking about is raising awareness, right? So we should point out to where are the problems, where are the issues, and why, based on these issues, is it necessary to change things, to challenge the industry, and to give consumers a more sustainable option than there are on the market. So I think raising awareness, and then obviously coming back to my first answer, set an example. So we as a business, we show that it is possible and it's for the good. And in the end, by doing that, by showing you an example, you want to motivate the industry.
Yes.
And you want to strive for other companies following you in what you do, in your approach of being a sustainable company. So in that sense, I think motivating the consumer starts with raising awareness. And then obviously,
yes.
It's also a lot about the product, right? So customers, they take a decision to buy a product, and then it needs to be clarified why should they buy that product. And it should also come with a benefit for them.
And if you give them an option, they have a choice.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do with our device, right? I mean, the Fairphone is quite a lone standing device. It's a modular device. It's sustainably sourced. We integrate, for example, fair trade gold in our supply chain as one of the first companies. And I think we are in this phase of motivating others. We see it's working, so why cannot others follow us?
Yes.
And that's actually a nice change that we see, I think, during the last years, that also more and more companies put their focus on this point of sustainability.
Yes. And Alicia, how do you think consumers be nudged more, making more sustainable choices?
Well, first of all, I think Sean made a great point. We have to raise awareness among consumers that there are sustainable options available. And there's also a big part of web stores. Web stores can also play a big part in this, because we at Thuiswinkel.org are a Dutch association for web stores, and we like to tell them and inform them that they don't have to be in this transition alone. They can work together with their consumers, and the simplest way to do that and the easiest way to do that is to inform their consumers about sustainability. And it can be on different areas, like sustainable packaging or the footprint and zero emissions or things like that. So there's
you can start with small things.
Yes, you can start with small things, and I also think there's a increasing demand towards retailers and towards web stores from consumers. They are saying, well, give us the information, let us help, let us make a difference, and by doing that, we together can make an impact, and that's the main thing we need to do.
Yeah.
And I just one thing to add here. I think there's a nice saying, which is, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you'll always got, right?
Yes.
And I think both of our companies, we're trying to not do what we always did, to get different results, to be also a motivating example of then motivating an industry. And I think we need to really break out of this old habit of doing things we always did.
Yes. To get better with the whole world.
Yeah.
And Zach, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I think they're all incredibly good points. I mean, to not do what we've always done. UPS as a company has been around for over 100 years now. But as we all know, we cannot simply do what we have always done. It's a great point. But this is the thing. We're not just doing it for the planet. We are doing it because there is a business in it. It's good for the planet, it's good for the people, but it's good for profit. So to take note of your survey that you mentioned, that 62% of people, that really speaks. But we're finding in our own research that others are doing the same, and others are other customers and other consumers are also really calling for sustainability. If I can quote, I have a survey to quote, because it really sums it up, I think. So we found we were working with a global consultant called Capgemini. And we found between 50 and 60% of consumers in European countries that we'd surveyed, they said that they switched to brands that were more sustainable. They switched to brands because they were more sustainable, which is
it's also good marketing.
Here. It is indeed good marketing. This is a thing that we can really harness, right? So, but then to the other side of your question, right? So it's key that businesses promote that sustainability. They promote it on their websites, for example, and that can be done with smaller businesses, because they have smaller, they tend to have less complex and shorter supply chains. So it's easier for them to do. But then on the other side of the question, to change behaviors, we need to reframe sustainable options, right? So I think, and I'm sure you guys might agree with me, often sustainable choices are associated with sacrificing something. So whether that's increasing the cost, reducing speed, sacrificing convenience, that sort of thing. And an assumption is also made that sustainability comes with a higher price tag, the famed green premium that everyone's talking about. And that is true to a certain extent, but in some cases we can ensure as suppliers that that's not necessarily the case. And I think the root issue here is lack of consumer awareness. So, for example, we run a program called the UPS Access Point Network. And so we have a worldwide network of more than 40,000 local retail points, like news agents and that sort of thing, and local shops. And they serve as nexus points for delivery rather than delivering to your home address. So a customer, for example, could choose to have it delivered to a collection point rather than being delivered to their door. Yes. And that benefits the environment, as I'm sure you can imagine, because at least from our perspective, it reduces the amount of individual residential deliveries that we have to make. So but what it can also do, and this is crucial, for businesses that ship with us, it reduces the delivery cost for them. So if an e-commerce business chooses to pass on this cost reduction to the end consumer, then that's an easy way to nudge them into making a sustainable choice, because it is also the most cost-effective choice, right?
But does the
So it works
consumer
for
also
businesses.
want this? The consumer also
Yes.
wants this.
Yeah, so we found that the consumer also wants this. And so there is another question to add. There's another angle, right? A lot of consumers are moving towards and calling for more sustainable options. And this is a sustainable option that you can offer them at a lesser price. But from a carbon perspective, obviously, if you then turn around and you say, okay, well, the consumer is then driving towards the access point, well, then that's something that we want to avoid. So we work to make sure that these access points are either in places that are within walking and cycling distance from the original consumer, or they're in places that are already on the way that the consumer is already going to, for example, shops. And what we found is that significantly reduces the carbon that is outputted. And so what we then say is we say, so we often advise businesses that use the access point to offer it as a price differential, because we then said it's good for the planet and it's good for cost. And that means that the consumer, even if they want to, as you said at the beginning, some say they want to, and then there are others, as we found in our research, that want to, but then that's not being reflected in what they're doing. So if we can nudge them in that direction, both by advertising what sustainable options that we offer and by advising our customers to do the same, and then also by providing a cost differential, we can then nudge everybody in the right direction that both customers are calling for, governments are calling for, and quite frankly, well, everybody else is calling for.
It sounds as good as solutions.
May I add something to that?
Yes.
Because we've done also some research in the Netherlands about pickup points and if they are more sustainable, if that is a more sustainable way to get your package delivered. And I think it depends on which country or which city you live in, if this is already a more sustainable delivery option, or maybe not. But pickup points can be the most sustainable delivery option in the Netherlands if there are at least 50% of all packages sent are going to a pickup point. So I think it's a good way to think about pickup points in a more sustainable delivery option. But it's also necessary to look at which country you live in, which city you live in, and it makes a difference.
So maybe there need to be more companies in Holland who want to use those pickup points or more.
Yes, but I think in the Netherlands, consumers are a bit spoiled because we are used to getting our package delivered at home.
Well, just to jump in on that, there is a behavior change that sort of needs to be seen, because of course it's not a package being delivered to your door. But from the perspective of a case-by-case basis, I think you brought up a really valuable point in terms of sustainable last-mile logistics. And that is that these things, you cannot apply one solution and apply it everywhere and see that it will work, right? Which is why
need more solutions.
Yes.
You need to be fancy about it, you need a plethora of solutions that can come from everywhere. So access points, yes, part of it depends where you are. Part of it depends on getting the message out to as many customers as possible to use that network. Because of course, if people use that network, we can implement more of them. But it is also about recognizing that is just one Tetris part, one Lego block in the whole, in the services that we can provide to make the last mile more sustainable.
Yeah, and I think it's really a lot country dependent, right? So I think the Netherlands is one of the least challenging countries in terms of logistics and transportation. But if you think in Europe towards the Nordics, or even if you move towards Switzerland, Italy, it becomes more challenging actually. And I think it needs to be a mix. So you need to offer solutions as access points. You maybe have to think of where is your stock located?
Yes.
Right? Where do you have your warehouses? I'm talking about centralization versus decentralization. And that is actually quite country dependent. So, and I think the challenge is in setting up this overall solution, but taking all the little challenges per country into account. But I think then the access points is one step towards the solution.
One little step.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's one step. Alicia, you worked on the bewust bezorgd project. For the people who don't speak Dutch, it means consistently delivered, which provided businesses with a carbon calculator that enabled them and their consumers to measure the potential footprint of their e-commerce choices. How is the uptake been among businesses, and how has it changed consumers' behaviors?
Yes, well, it's been a bit of a struggle at first, because we've started this project a few years ago, and well, you maybe can imagine that 2, 3, 4 years ago, retailers and web stores were thinking about sustainability a lot. There was not so much of a demand from their consumers. The media and the press weren't all over it, and that changed in the last couple of years. So that's helping us to make sure bewust bezorgd is getting implemented and used by our members. And there are a few members of us, larger web stores, that are working with bewust bezorgd, and we gave them a bit of a choice. We made this tool for our members, so for web stores, not as much for consumers. And the thing they get out of it is they get insight in their footprint. So they get to know the total amount of CO2 emissions with all their packages that are being sent, but also get inside information about which delivery option is more sustainable or which delivery option increases CO2 emissions. And they are using it to innovate on their part, on their own side. So that's, I think, our first, that's the start for bewust bezorgd. Later on, we noticed the power of consumers, because they are making choices in the checkout pages about which way they want their package to be delivered, and we tried to translate it. So bewust bezorgd is not only there for retailers for their own information, but also can be used in the checkout. And in that way, web stores can show their consumers which delivery option at that moment for individual cases and individual orders is the most sustainable
so the consumers
delivery
also
option.
have more insight.
Yes, and that's just the part where web stores were a little bit insecure about. So do I have to give them information about this, and how will they receive this information?
How do they receive it?
Well, they receive it quite well, because it turns out to be a really simple way of getting these information and doing something about it, and make a different choice. So we left it up onto the web stores themselves if they wanted to give this information by text, by illustration, or some other way. And so everybody is working with it on a different level that fits their own style, fits their own
What options can you choose? An electric vehicle?
For example, if the web store is using of working with a carrier,
who has an electric vehicle.
Yes. And also the most simple and common delivery options in the Netherlands, like next day delivery or pick-up points, whatever, those options make a difference. Because we are looking at where does the package come from, where does it have to go to, and what are the effects on the emissions.
And do you always have to have this product next day? I think maybe 60%, maybe more, doesn't need to have it the next day, the product.
No, absolutely. Where people buy a summer dress in the winter or other stuff they don't need.
So it's also okay if it's delivered in summer then?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's maybe a little bit late, but it starts, it makes consumers think about why they choose this option all the time. Why are we choosing next day delivery as standard delivery option.
Yes.
And by giving information, it makes sure they think about it twice and maybe choose a different.
Do you also have this option for sustainable choices?
Yeah, so at the moment, no. But what we do, obviously, we have CO2 neutral shipping implemented. And we're trying to focus at the moment a bit more on the topic of packaging.
Yes.
Because that also has at least an indirect impact on the CO2 footprint, depending on the circle you draw, even a direct impact. So actually, if you reduce the package size, if you don't use reused or recycled plastics at all, right? If you want to have that out of your packaging at all, you reduce the shipping weight, you reduce the air you ship, the smaller the box is.
And it's also more sustainable.
So exactly. So in the end, that is obviously one factor. What I wanted to add at your point is, I think the more points we add along the customer journey, wherever that is, and with whatever store that is, the more necessary it is for the customer to make a conscious choice, because we are also giving them then different options. And in that way, I think they also want to go for the most sustainable solution, but you also need to make this information easily accessible and available for them, because they want to have it actually on the plate, right? So if I go somewhere shopping in a web shop, I want to see the information I need, and then I take my decision.
Yes, before you're going to buy it, before you're going to pay it.
And there I see also the companies and the private sector a bit in a driving seat of offering this information, making it available to the customers. And this will in the end then lead to the sustainable choice and helps obviously increasing the sustainable products on the market.
Yes. And Alicia, the businesses you advise promote sustainable products or services on their sites. What questions or feedback are they receiving from customers around sustainability?
Well, the feedback is there's not one main thing that they get back from their customers. It depends highly on what type of products that is being sold at the web store, what type of consumers it attracts, what type of business you are. So I think there are always like 3 topics that are mentioned by consumers, and it's returns, packaging, and emissions.
Yes.
And because it's the most, it gets, how do you say it? Close to home, because you can literally see the van standing in front of you. You have the package in your hands, and also there are a lot of returns. So those 3 topics are the main things consumers are questioning web stores about, or challenging web stores about.
So reducing returns, Zach, is also a big thing, I think. How you're doing that at UPS?
Well, reducing returns actually brings up quite an interesting point, and that is the engagement of the consumer within this whole process. You know, as we've already mentioned, this is not just sustainability is not just a one-time thing, right? It's used. The challenge with any sustainable product, right, is to ensure that it's sourced sustainably, it's used sustainably, and then at the end of life, it's recycled sustainably.
Yes.
And that is not just that's something that governments can help with. And most of all, this is private enterprise pushing this. And it is also the customer. So whatever we can do as private enterprise to make that choice as easy as possible for the customer is going to be essential within this. And that is partly allowing customers to make an informed decision, giving them all of the information that they need, but then it is also giving them the resources that they need. So, and that's a two-pronged thing. So for us, one of the main things that we look at is packaging, and most of our packaging is cardboard, right? But there are certain elements that are plastic, and the plastic is going to be an essential element within this, because as we've said, the 2 things, some of the 2 things that customers are looking for are emissions, and they're looking at waste packaging. So last year we updated our recyclable express packs, and these are pouches that our customers can order online through ups.com, and they consist of 80% post-consumer recycled plastic. They're just one-time use, but they're always recycled and recyclable. That is the main thing, so that we source them correctly, and then at the end of life, they can be recycled. And there are two other aspects to it, right? Aside from just the consumer recycled plastic. Originally, we were sourcing the older version of these packs from Southeast Asia, which is not sustainable, right? So now we source them from Germany, which is a lot closer to our market here. And that comes back to the shipping point, because by making that decision alone, we save 65 metric tons of CO2 by not using containers to ship those materials into the European market. So we've listened to customers, we've created a product that's sourced sustainably, used sustainably, and can be recycled sustainably. But most of all, the main issue then is if we provide these solutions, we need to ensure that the customer can choose them and knows that they are there by making that informed decision, by seeing how much carbon can be reduced, by seeing what sustainable options there are. And so when make it visible so that even for smaller companies that would ship with us, their consumers are going to make that choice already. And that, as we've seen before, that benefits that customer, because in the end, they are showing themselves to be a sustainable company.
Yes.
But also, so it's good for the planet, but it's also good for their profit margins.
And you also see it a lot of at the clothing shops that they don't use plastic anymore. I see that.
Yes.
I send a lot of returns. I'm sorry, but
It's a good development.
yes, because you don't need the plastic at a sweater or at a trouser.
We are creating a long-lasting device,
Yes.
which is repairable by the customer. So obviously, we want people to use their devices as long as possible.
So not every year a new phone.
No, definitely not. The question would also be why.
Yeah.
There is
why.
there is not really a need.
Because the updating stops. That's why we.
Now you see that the challenge with producing a smartphone, you have actually two bigger factors. One factor is hardware, so everything that is built in the device, and the other factor is called software, and that's what is running on the device. In the Android world, and sorry to take this little technical turn here, so we have Android installed on our Fairphone devices, and in the Android world, it's quite scattered. So that means per producer, per manufacturer, their support of Android is different.
Yes.
And that's why you have to take care of both factors, hardware and software. And there is also often the challenge in terms of software support. Yeah. So how long can you support a certain software on a device? The longer you can, the longer is the lifespan of your device.
How long?
And the less carbon emissions you have. Well, we proved actually for the Fairphone 2 that we are now software supporting for more than 6 years, which is quite outstanding in the Android world.
Yes.
And we are striving to support the software on our devices for at least 5 years.
But what's your business model then? Because they need to buy a new phone to.
Good question. I mean, the idea is, it's quite an easy equation, right? If you think about it. So we only want customers to buy a device when that is absolutely necessary. We want them to replace modules if possible. Because what is our idea? To walk towards this circular economy. And this is part of circular economy, to ensure that a customer can use the product as long as possible. And behind there is a market, because our goal is to obviously extend our market share, to get better known across Europe, right? To show that a sustainable device is worth having, and it's actually a step helping humanity to escape this let's say challenge of climate change.
Yes. A good green business model.
Yes.
Yes.
It's actually, just on that note, it's really interesting. We at UPS say that one of the most sustainable miles is the mile that you don't drive. So aside from other solutions that we can offer, this is all about optimization and allowing, essentially getting rid of waste in all elements, whether that's miles that you've driven or space within packaging. So we offer customized packaging solutions for bigger businesses, which essentially mean that we can optimize what space we use within our packaging centers. We don't want to be shipping air, because that is a waste of time, money, and carbon.
Yes.
And so any way that we can optimize and allow for ourselves not to be shipping air and not to be driving miles that we don't need to drive is going to be a way that we can work together to reduce our carbon emissions.
Yes. And Sean, how do you think you can balance your sustainability ethos with an e-commerce based business model?
There again, we are the living example, right? So we somehow are able to balance it, and I think everyone is able to balance that, because also in the end, it's about giving the customer the right choice and making them aware of that their decision has an impact always.
Yes.
And so I think how we balance that is obviously that we make sure we have things as access points, CO2 neutral shipping implemented, that we keep in mind how also our reverse logistics, so how many devices do we return, what could we do to potentially not return them, cut down CO2 emissions, and then it all comes back to modularity, so modularity of the device, being able to exchange modules. And I think we are able to balance it in a way that we are thinking about the circular economy approach.
Yes.
And balancing here also, if you think about the part when the device is not working anymore or whatever happens, so if it reaches the end of life, then you would have to reuse or recycle it. We offer these options on the market to get closer to the circular approach, to re-implement materials and to make the best use out of those as much as possible. And I think that's how you have, balancing in that sense of closing the circular economy approach.
Yes.
And also I think we have to change our behavior, because why is it necessary to have always the newest thing or get more of things? And by starting that change in behavior, I think we have to definitely start with raising awareness and inform people, educate people, and
also at school, starting at school.
Yes, yes, we have to start very early, because otherwise there's we can all try to get to a very good circular economy, but if there's no behavioral change.
AliExpress, we've learned to buy a lot of things, that we can buy everything around the world and just ship it, and then
but also the customer expectation plays a big role, right? Think about delivery times, what you mentioned in the beginning. I mean, maybe we should also make customers, or in general users, more aware of what is the impact of having the package the next day delivered to your house door. So I think it's a very broad topic, and the first point to start is raise awareness.
Yes.
But I think we have two worlds right now. Maybe the world in the sustainable, more sustainable world, the people who want to make it more sustainable, more thinking about the circular economy. But we also have the world of the AliExpresses and that sort of the Amazons.
Well,
we're also increasing, but in the other way.
Let's say it's one world, two approaches.
Okay, it's one world.
It is in the end, and I think when we come to the conclusion that it's one world and everyone has to take a step towards being more sustainable, there's no way around it.
No.
And it's an inevitable situation what we're heading towards. And I think the more we show that sustainable business models are working, the easier it is also for others to say, hey, why not try that? Why not put our focus on sustainability and do something good in the end?
Do you have one last advice, one last tip for people who are watching this session and want to be more sustainable?
Yes, I think the most important thing you can do is to make sure, where do you start? Because for every business or retailer or web store or whatever, you can start somewhere. And it can be small, it can be big, it doesn't matter, but you have to start. And there are quite a lot solutions or startups or innovations that are available to make that start and make it happen. And also be aware of the fact that you don't have to do this change alone. You work together with other businesses, with your customers, with local stakeholders, whatever, just work together and that will make a change.
And there is a business.
Yes, definitely.
We've proved. Zach, do you have something to add to this to conclude?
Yes, just that. If you want to work sustainably, it is not something that is a negative. It is a positive. And it's not something that it's not something you can frame as a positive. It is something that is actually positive. And you are not alone in this. There are customers that are calling for it. You have a load of options that you can go for. And whilst it might seem overwhelming, the amount of options, and whilst it may seem overwhelming, in some cases, the choices that you can make, you are not alone in having support to find that out. And so that's why this is such a fantastic initiative, because it allows people and it will inform people on how best to go about finding sustainable options. They're out there, and they are going to be fantastic for your business.
And use it as marketing.
As marketing, but also simply because it is the right thing to do. I think that is also something that needs to underline this. We are one world, and it is the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, Zach, Sean, and Alicia. Thank you very much for being here and also having this fantastic discussion about sustainability. With this, we have come to an end. I would also like to thank you for watching this session, this second episode of Go Beyond series. We're looking forward to see you at our next episode. And I would say, have a nice day.